Hello, Internet. Welcome to another episode of the Experimental Cataclysm. If you're unfamiliar, this is the show where we talk about changes that have come to the experimental version of Cataclysm over the last 2 weeks or so. This week, we do have a lot of new creatures, so there will be some spoilers in this episode. We're not going to talk about them in depth. There's just too many new creatures to really spend any amount of time discussing each one individually. But there is one creature in particular that we're going to discuss, their special abilities, things like that. So there will be spoilers ahead. But anyway, let's just jump into it. First, from Knight, we got a Jason version of the parking lot. This is something, so Knight has done multiple, I don't know what you would call it. They say Jasonify, I guess. And so basically, if you don't know what that means, is essentially there's a lot of locations in the game that are basically just text. They're easily edited. In fact, let me pull one up. Actually, we can just look at the one that's been JSONized. So this is what a location in Cataclysm will look like if it's written in JSON. It's in basic text, and then each little symbol represents something different, or multiple things, even like furniture and terrain and whatnot. And you can see that listed down here. And this is how you would make a location if you were a modder or someone who was looking to contribute to Cataclysm. So JSON is good. It's readable text format. It's in basic English, and it's pretty easy to understand once you know what you're looking at. However, there are some locations in Cataclysm that are still hard-coded, and what that means is that they're actually written in C++ and defined in the actual code of the game, and we can see that here is what the parking lot previously looked like. And you can see that this is much less readable, especially if you don't really understand anything about the game. Even if you understand coding, you might not understand what some of these things specifically mean. So anything that moves a location from code into JSON, and I do say JSON, I know some people say JSON, forgive me, but once it gets moved here, it's a lot more editable. It's something that can be expanded on by contributors a lot more easily, because many of us who contribute don't actually understand C++. And yeah, Knight has done quite a few of these locations. We discussed the, I want to say FEMA camp was one. The Rat Cave, I remember, was one that got JSONized pretty not that long ago. And this is always a good step, so I always try to shout it out whenever I see this. I know it's just a parking lot. It's not going to impact very many people. But anything that moves things from being hard-coded to JSON is beneficial for the project, because it makes it available to a lot more people who can contribute, edit, change, and add on to these locations. So I just wanted to shout that out. Like I said, this is something Knight has done a fair bit of over the course of, I mean, not like a ton, but anything that moves those things from code to JSON is a good thing. So I wanted to shout that out. All right, next from Curse Twist, I am having some issues. My launcher keeps crashing, so I can't actually update the game at the moment. I wanted to show you this in the game, but I'm having issues, and that's a real bummer because there's other stuff today that I wanted to show you in the game. But from Curse Twist, we got an update to the farms, and for the record, it's not just farms. I noticed that this has been something they're doing. Really, any location that has plants growing, like in a planter or in a crop type situation. And I didn't understand what this meant. And because of that, I thought we would discuss it, because if I don't know what it means, probably a lot of you don't either. And it was specifically this: sealed corn seedlings and sealed crops. And I had no idea what that meant. But apparently, and again, I can't show you this in the game, so sorry. The only screenshot is this one, and it's a little zoomed out. We can't really see. But if you've been to a farm or other plant growing location in the game, you've probably noticed that on the farm plots, the mounds of dirt, normally items will spawn on top of those. It will just be a mismatch of, pumpkins and cabbages and all kinds of crap, and it will just be items on top of those plots. Not really how plants work, right? And so this change and the other changes surrounding it are making it so that these plants are actually like growing plants. They're actually like sealed, quote unquote, sealed containers. So instead of just being a free item on top of a farm plot, it's actually contained within like the plant, within that plant mound and all that stuff, which I thought was a really cool change, because it never made sense that they would just have items spawned randomly on top. And I did want to look at this more closely, but again, I can't get my game to update, which I probably should have tried to work on before I started the game, but before I started the recording. So it probably doesn't sound like much, and it really isn't that big of a deal, but I thought this was a really cool change. And again, it's doing this also for houses that might have like a little garden plot in the background or whatnot. So I thought this was pretty cool. And yeah, I just wanted to shout that out. Next, from Lamandis, we got condoms added to wallets. This is something that I know a lot of you... So condoms, in my opinion, don't have a ton of uses in the game. They are used for the makeshift stethoscope recipe, which is a really valuable recipe to get access to because stethoscopes can be very difficult to find. And I know a lot of players have been using them to store fluids, something that really kind of bothers me. Like, I don't really min-max in the game. I think it's silly that you would store beverages in condoms. Obviously, in real life, you would never drink out of a condom. But people do that, and people really like them because when you have a condom, they essentially take up virtually no space in your inventory, and then they can be used to basically store quite a large volume compared to their portability, right? It's a pretty optimal item for that if you're into min-maxing. So this person has come along and added them to the wallet item group, which means they will start showing up in wallets. And because so many people like them and because they are pretty valuable for stethoscopes, I thought I would shout this out. Take a look at wallets. We discussed this in a previous episode once wallets were kind of added to the game and they started to get things put in them. They're going to have valuables in them, and it's going to be pretty easy to miss if you're a new player and you don't think to pick up wallets. Especially if you're a non-cash card player. Like, a lot of people don't even bother with cash cards, so they might never look in a wallet. But at this point, wallets can contain condoms, which have their value, and ID cards as well. So definitely keep an eye on wallets in the future, especially if you're looking to build yourself a stethoscope. So I thought that was a cool little change. Do people still put condoms in wallets? I was always taught you're not supposed to do that because they can be damaged when you like sit on your wallet and stuff. I don't know if that's true. Or just one of those things people tell you. Next, also from Night, we got updated 2 new variants of the liquor store. I don't know how many variants there generally are for the liquor store, but these are ones that you're not really hoping to find. These are specifically a looted/vandalized version and a boarded up version of the liquor store. Let me take a look at what those look like. Here's the looted vandalized version. It looks like people may have broken in and had a party. You can see there's some smashed items. There's loose, I'm assuming empty containers all over the place. Quite a bit of graffiti. It's interesting that the kegs are still here. I can't seem to get my game working, but I would love to check and see if these are empty kegs or if they still have some alcohol in them. Looks like at the very least you can still find a shopping cart here as well as containers if you're looking for gallon jugs and whatnot. But obviously if you're out looting, this is one of the less valuable locations you could find. Also, they maybe overdid it with the bile just a little bit. It looks like people vomited literally everywhere. But maybe that's typical. I didn't go to college. I don't know what a real raucous party looks like. And then the other version is the boarded up variant, presumably closed before the Cataclysm and broken down. Again, it's peculiar that the kegs are here at all. If this was a boarded up location, I'm not sure why. I'm assuming this is an empty bottle, but I don't know that for sure. So I find it a bit odd that they would still have left kegs behind. Seems like a valuable thing they would have taken with them. But these are not like super common. I just wanted to shout them out because we don't have a ton of locations that are looted or broken into and things like that. So I thought it was really cool. And a liquor store seems like a natural thing for people in the apocalypse to loot. It seems like obviously people would go to gun stores and things like that to arm themselves. But people love their booze, and it seems like the sort of thing people would break into and steal. And I don't know about a party exactly, but I do like the idea of a looted variant. So I wanted to shout that out. I didn't look how common they are, especially compared to the other ones. I would have to look specifically to see what the standard ones' weights are, which I don't know and I don't feel like looking at. So presumably not the most common, but yeah, interesting changes. Next, from Irk, we have an introduction of chewing to reduce the volume of low-density foods. Now, before we begin, I do want to say I don't know the math behind this. I can't tell you exactly. I don't want to enable people to min-max. It's just not something that I like to do. But this is going to change the way that food interacts with your stomach. So the way Cataclysm works, you have a stomach. As far as I know, based on your stomach contents, that is what determines how hungry your character is. So if you eat a bunch of high volume food, your stomach will fill up more quickly because that volume will be taking up space in your stomach, and it will reduce your hunger and will increase your satiety. However, this is being changed because it was a bit wonky. Specifically, they were using the example of popcorn. So if you think about popcorn in real life, let's say we cook a bowl of popcorn, takes up a whole big bowl. Oh my goodness, it's so fluffy and delicious. Hooray. However, that volume that it occupies in that bowl is not the same volume that it would occupy in your stomach. When you eat the popcorn, you chew up the popcorn, which compresses it, which breaks it down into smaller pieces so that it can fit together more, easily. And so eating a giant bowl of popcorn is not really the same equivalent as putting that bowl in your stomach. It gets broken down and the volume is lower. In Cataclysm previously, it was not handled this way, so if something had a high volume, it essentially converted all of that volume directly into your stomach, which meant that you would be filled up much more quickly, which would affect your hunger level. It would affect your ability to eat additional foods, things like that. Irk has tried to make some sense out of that. So now, instead of just converting the volume directly into your stomach, there is a simulation of chewing, let's say, which converts the volume of an item as you eat it into a different volume. And again, I don't know the exact math behind it. I don't really want to even look because, one, I'm probably not going to understand it. And two, it's not going to mean much to me because I don't really min-max. We can see some examples here. I couldn't tell you really what this means exactly. Don't hate me. It looks like... No, I don't really know what this means. But essentially, what does this mean for the player? It just means that now when you eat, you're going to notice that some of the voluminous foods that you would previously eat that would like instantly fill your stomach up is going to now be a little bit more reasonable. It's going to allow for additional room of food in your stomach. It's not a huge change, and I think ultimately is a pretty good change. I do foresee some people being frustrated because I think a lot of people min-max the hunger system. It's one of those things, like it's probably the one I see the most common thing where people ask questions about how do I min-max this? What's the exact number of calories I need? Well, how do I do this? How do I do that? Just eat like a normal person. That's always my recommendation. Eating voluminous foods is still an effective way of combating hunger. It's still going to fill you up. It's just a question of, it's just not going to be quite as much as it used to be. And presumably there's some sense behind it. So certain foods, I assume, will be affected much more than other foods. Popcorn is an excellent example because the volume of popcorn changes so much through you eating it. If you were eating something like they use the bratwurst example, bratwurst probably is not broken down like volume-wise quite as much as popcorn would be. Yeah, it's going to change things, but I don't think it will have a huge impact on players. And honestly, the min-maxers are just going to figure out a way to work around it anyway, so I don't think that they're even a factor here. So I like this change a lot. Hopefully that all made sense. I do feel a little bit like I didn't know how to discuss this one exactly because I didn't look at the science behind it, because I just don't care about the science behind it. I trust Irk probably did a pretty good job, and I'm not too I'm not too concerned about it. But then again, I'm not a min-maxer, so who knows? Okay, now we're going to get into the various new creatures that have been added to the game. Just again, I'm not going to discuss them all individually, and unfortunately my game is having issues, so I can't even go in the game to show you anything about them, unfortunately. But first, from Kane, we have added mutated forest creatures, and it adds a selection of mutated woodland creatures, and it adds mutated versions of deer, wolf, dog, cat, and bear, plus 2 separate mutated versions of the beaver. Thought this was pretty interesting just because of the volume of the number of creatures that have been added in this PR. We can see them laid out here. They don't have tiles, of course. They're new creatures. And again, I'm not going to go into detail on each of them individually. I just wanted to shout it out because I really like seeing new creatures added to the game. And we've really, over the course of 0.E to 0.F, we've had more creatures added than any other time that I've been playing the game, especially mutated and zombie animals are two things that have been really expanded over the last like 6 months or so. I just really love that. And I just wanted to shout this out. So thank you, Kane. Again, just a variety of mutated forest creatures. Pretty interesting. I'm sure they'll be popping up pretty frequently in the forest. Next, from Vanera, we have added fireflies to the game. I really love this idea. If we scroll down, pretty basic as far as things go. It's a firefly. They will spawn in swamps specifically. They're just simple creatures and they illuminate the area around them. Really liked this when I saw it, mostly because we've had the functionality for having glowing or light radiating creatures for quite a long time. And unfortunately, they're really not implemented in the game. There's only, I don't know, 4 maybe creatures that give off light like this. There's a very, very few, maybe more than 4, but like there's very few of them. And a firefly is such like an innocuous, kind of cool world buildy type thing. I didn't look at the description of this creature, but if it was done well, I think that this could be a nice little lore thing. Like, I don't know, I was like the non-hostile kind of passive creatures that you put into the world are usually there to build the feel of the world. So I think if this was executed well, this could be a really cool and interesting, you know, again, it's very simple. It's not like a powerful enemy. It's not a zombie. It's just an interesting little world building thing, if that even makes sense. I really liked this. But then I have a little bit of a soft spot for swamp creatures. I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to shout it out. Next, from Candleberry, we have a series of new zombies. This is what I wanted to show you in-game that I can't. Again, my game is not cooperating with me, so I can't actually launch and update the game at the moment. This creature specifically has some pretty spooky abilities, and I really wanted to show you that in-game and what to look for that, but I'm unable to do that. So essentially, it adds a phase skulker. Now, this zombie has the ability to teleport, which is pretty freaking significant. As far as I know, there's no other creature in the game currently that can teleport. You may have seen creatures that appear to be teleporting by moving up and down Z levels, but as far as I know, there's nothing that explicitly has the teleport type ability until now. Unless, I mean, maybe Cataclysm or something has it, but I can't think of anything in vanilla that does this. This has the ability to teleport every 5 turns, which is pretty frequent. Now, it's worth noting these are safe teleports, which means that they're not going to teleport into you and kill you instantly. Which is good. Being telefragged is frustrating. However, it is worth noting that it cannot kill other zombies this way either. It was really the only upside of something teleporting is the possibility that it would burst out of other enemies. So that's a bit of a disappointment, but I do think it's probably for the best because insta-killing a player with some random zombie would be very frustrating. They also have powerful melee strikes. So this creature currently only spawns in micro labs. There's talk somewhere in here about putting them elsewhere, but for now they only spawn within micro labs. I personally don't really go to micro labs, so I don't think I'll be seeing them very much. I don't know how frequently players go to those locations, but you definitely need to be aware that this thing exists. Again, I haven't been able to look at the actual teleportability. I don't know if it's like really random. I don't know if it's super targeted on the player. I'm not sure how exactly they teleport. I'm not sure how much they will pass through walls, if they have to detect a player before they can teleport. I don't know how all of this works. Haven't been able to test it, but it's definitely something you need to keep an eye on. In addition to that, there's an upgrade for these creatures. They evolve into Shrikes, which have a slower teleport, 15 turn cooldown as opposed to 5. And when they teleport, they cause an electric explosion and have higher armor and a lunge attack. Okay. So that sounds pretty scary. The lunge attack in conjunction with a teleport. Lunge attacks are already quite powerful. Let's look for the Shrike here. Their teleport in particular it looks like the explosion is 5 to 10 damage. Oh yes, their armor is like absurdly high, like tank levels of high. So that's pretty scary on its own. And to give such a bulky armored creature lunge is also a bit scary. I'm not exactly sure what the definition, like the defined range of lunge is, but it allows them to very quickly leap quite a few squares, I believe. If I'm remembering lunge correctly, I might be confusing that with leap actually now that I say that. But regardless, the teleport has a 15-round cooldown, and between that, a lunge ability and very high armor, this is a pretty dangerous creature. It also has better night vision than what a standard creature usually has, or a standard zombie, I should say. It also appears to glow. So, being able to see it in the dark will be helpful. It only has 10 HP. That seems wrong. I'm wondering if that's supposed to be 100. Because that's, well, they have 40 armor, though. Okay, well, regardless. And you gave it the hard to shoot flag? Okay, so this creature sounds horrifying, and I would encourage you to probably flee from those. If you can get a shot off on them, that's great, but with the hard to shoot flag, it's going to be very difficult to land a shot, and even if you do, 40 armor is extremely difficult to overcome. I guess it's 30 for ballistic, but yes, a very, very powerful creature. I was looking to see what the exact explosion is. It looks like it may just be shock tiles like you would get from a shocker. Looks like well, okay. Well, again, I would like to look at this in the game. I haven't been able to do so. Point is, these are extremely scary creatures, particularly the higher evolution one. They will be in microlabs. To my understanding, microlabs tend to be pretty packed already. So I think these things may end up killing quite a few of their fellow zombies with their shocks and things. But ultimately, I do think that this is an extremely dangerous creature that the player will be going up against. And you definitely should be aware of that. Yeah, I can't think of anything that teleports. I guess probably eyes do. Do eyes teleport in vanilla? I'm sure there probably is something that teleports in vanilla, and I just can't think of it. But yeah, interesting. Scary, honestly. Next, from Lyle SY, we have 3 new monster upgrades for Flesh Raptors. If you're unfamiliar, Flesh Raptors are the bird-like creatures that will come out of pupating zombies. They have that really obnoxious impale ability, blah blah, etc. And this adds multiple upgrades for them. It also adds upgrades for shady versions of them. In fact, didn't they explain each one? One has, so again, Flesh Raptor upgrades. One has the Night Invisibility flag. This is the flag that shady zombies have, so when it's in darkness, it will become invisible. Another with the Explodes on Death flag, or rather, Death function, or whatever. I'm not sure what we call that. So it'll explode on death, and it has a suicide special attack. I actually don't like that. We discussed pretty recently suicidal, like, quote unquote zombie creatures, and whether or not that's something they would actually do. So I can't really think of why they would kamikaze and blow themselves up. I guess if they're, I don't know lore of the game. I don't really want to go into it. And one that has shocker abilities. In addition to that, shadies get evolutions that have the 2 shady pupating forms and allows a ninja upgrade. I don't know what that means. And then a spell to create shady. Yeah, okay. Shady skeletal hulks. No, please don't do that. So the Flesh Raptors have gotten some upgrades. I'm not a huge fan of them as creatures, to be honest. The idea of flying zombies is fine by me. I just don't really like their implementation. Last time I played, which admittedly has been probably 6 weeks or so. They had an impale ability that was a very rapid ability, so I'm not a huge fan of them to begin with, and they seem like pretty shockingly common. I keep finding them over and over and over. But it makes sense that they would get some evolutions, and it looks like Lyle is working within like the bounds of things that already exist. It's not like he's giving them some new crazy unheard of ability. No, he's working within the things that already exist, like the shady invisibility flag, the exploding on death that we would get from like, a boomer or something, that sort of stuff, and shocker powers as well. So nothing super new, definitely things you've probably already experienced before and probably have already learned to work around and strategize against. But yeah, Flash Raptors, new evolutions. How about that? Next from Irk, we got an audit of activity levels. So this came down a couple weeks ago. Was merged 17 days ago. So you've probably already noticed this in the game. We, a month ago, 2 months ago, we were dealing with people getting super weary because we were basically doing all this exercise, huge calorie burning, people starving to death. All these really not good things were coming from the activity levels that existed in the game. So in the game, they classify things as light, moderate, or heavy exercise, or whatever the exact words are. And apparently when they were first implemented, they were all done by script, which of course is, a great way to do things in bulk, but ultimately is not perfect because it's not a human being that's doing them and applying reason to them using human logic. So what happened was they went through apparently every single one. It says here somewhere manually checks every use of light exercise and change some of them to no exercise. And essentially, basically, what this boils down to is that many things that previously worked our character, burned more calories, things like that, have been changed. Specifically here, we're looking at a lot of tailoring recipes. Yeah, it's just a ton of recipes. So what that means to me is that many things that you would craft previously would burn quite a bit of calories, which would make you more likely to become weary and things like that. And Irk has gone through and audited many of these things, which significantly reduced the amount of exercise that your character is doing. So you've probably already noticed that you're not becoming weary quite as quickly as you used to. Probably noticing that your calorie consumption is lower. Right? It's got to affect weariness. Weariness was just pulled directly from calorie consumption, right? Once you hit a certain point, it enabled weariness. I think that's how that works. But regardless, you will definitely be consuming less calories now because many things that were previously, and I mean many things, like there are just hundreds of these that have been changed. And many of them have been audited. Many of them no longer use exercise. Like I said, most of what I'm seeing is recipes. So crafting should be less calorie consuming than it once was. I did notice as well that some of the multipliers were changed. Time multipliers on crafting. So I'm not sure how that exactly impacts calorie consumption and things like that. I'm assuming because the time multipliers previously existed and some of them have been removed or lowered. I think what that means is that you will be consuming less calories because you're doing it for less periods of time or for shorter periods of time. But really, regardless of the exact, information and the exact changes, Irk went through, audited a bunch of things, and you should be consuming fewer calories now and struggling a little bit less because many things that were previously exercise are now not exercise and therefore don't burn additional calories, if that all makes sense. So really great change. A lot of people had been complaining and struggling with that system. Next, from Cass Wedson, we have a replacing of first aid kits with an item group. If you don't know what item groups are, that doesn't mean much to you, but basically the way you can think about it is that the contents within a first aid kit are no longer just a predefined thing. They will now pull from a group that determines what the contents are. If we can find, looks like they changed the probabilities, but I'm looking specifically for their contents. Okay, so here's what we're looking for. In a full first aid kit, the main thing I want to discuss about this change is that you can now find partially depleted first aid kits. They're not a guarantee to have everything in them. So I've seen people on Discord who are coming in saying, well, my first aid kit didn't have disinfectant. Why? What was happening? That is because you can now find partially depleted first aid kits. So if you find a full first aid kit, it will have the things that you typically will find. You'll find medical tape, aspirin, disinfectant, saline, which I don't remember there being saline. Must be a relatively recent thing. Adhesive bandages, medical gauze, and a first aid booklet. It looks like these are all guaranteed to spawn if you find a full first aid kit, and it looks like it will always have the same exact number of charges. However, you can also find used first aid kits which change the items that are inside, which is medical tape, aspirin, disinfectant, saline, adhesive bandages, medical gauze, and a first aid booklet. It looks like that is the same number of things here. However, you will also find partially depleted charges, so that medical tape you find may be anything from an empty roll all the way up to a full 20 charges. Aspirin is the same way. You will find any amount of aspirin between 1 and 10, and then in addition to that, there are certain things that have a kind of check on whether or not they will spawn at all. So for instance, if you find a depleted first aid kit and you are looking for disinfectant, you only have a 20% chance of that first aid kit containing disinfectant, 60% chance that there will be saline, and a 50% chance of the first aid booklet. Now, I like the idea of having partially depleted first aid kits, but I think the implementation was a bit of a mistake. Specifically, so let's think about this from a realism perspective. Most people who own first aid kits, well, honestly, I don't think most people own a proper first aid kit. I think most people have various medical supplies around their house. Most people have a bottle of peroxide somewhere, a bottle of rubbing alcohol, probably a box of Band-Aids, or maybe a roll of a roll of a traditional bandage. But many people don't have a proper first aid kit in their home, and among people who do, there are certain universals like bandages and peroxide, things like that for small wounds. However, more significant things are much less significant. And I think the issue is that, are the first aid kits in the game, are they for home use? Are they something that, I as a person have bought for my home? Was it a prepackaged kit that I bought? Is it a commercial first aid kit that you would find like in a fast food restaurant? Is it an industrial first aid kit that you would find in a factory somewhere? There's no definition on what exactly a first aid kit is, and it kind of leads to some issues. Most people at home who have a home first aid kit probably don't have saline, right? Nobody has a bag of saline at their house, right? And then among the items that exist in this first aid kit, there's just not a lot of sense to it. So we have a 60% chance of finding saline in a first aid kit, but we only have a 20% chance of disinfectant. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. I would say that virtually every home in America has some form of disinfectant in it, even if it's only crappy, maybe, like rubbing alcohol is something that you shouldn't really use on wounds, but it exists and is a disinfectant, and most people have it in their house. A bottle of hydrogen peroxide is not a great disinfectant, but it's something that a lot of people have in their home. And then in addition to that, if we expand disinfectant and we start talking about like antibacterial ointment and creams and things that you can buy over the counter, it becomes all that much more common. Almost every home in America has one of those things. Basically, no one has saline, and so it makes no sense to me that we would have a 20% chance of recovering a bottle of disinfectant, but a 60% chance of recovering a bag of saline. It's just nonsensical. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Same with the first aid booklet. Of all the things that you could have made a 50-50 chance, why a first aid booklet? It's such a peculiar thing. How many people actually use a first aid booklet, even if it came with a kit? Like this was a prepackaged kit that came with all of these things. Why would anyone ever take the first aid booklet out of the first aid kit? It's something that's so only situationally useful and most people would never look at, let alone interact with. So it just seems odd to me that that's a 50-50 shot. I would much rather have seen these, instead of these being percentage chances of just not existing, I would much rather have seen them become charges. Like I said, almost everyone has a bottle of hydrogen peroxide or similar item in their home. Most of them are partially empty. So instead of being a 20% chance of finding this item, I would much rather see it become, oh, okay, someone used, 2/3 of the bottle. And so it's a range of charges between like 0 portions and 3 portions maybe. Much rather see that than an 80% chance of no disinfectant at all. Saline, I think, is one of the things that just should not exist in a standard first aid kit. And ultimately, I think this is indicative of a problem in Cataclysm anyway. I think we need to define what the first aid kits are. We already have an IFAC, which is a very specific item that has very specific contents because they're manufactured in bulk to be that exact item and have those exact contents. So what I would like to see is a differentiation between commercial, industrial, and home first aid kits, as well as prepackaged kits that you would buy from a store for the purposes of keeping in an emergency. I would also like to see people expand into prepper-specific first aid kits. A prepper's like a person who preps for the apocalypse and things like that. They will have much more expansive things. I know people personally who have a very prepper-esque first aid kit in their home. This includes things like sutures, which we don't have in the game yet, but also they will go to Canada to buy codeine specifically because in America you can't get Tylenol with codeine. And so it's an over-the-counter thing in Canada, and they actually go out of their way to get those stronger painkillers specifically for their prepper first aid kit because it's they're going in with the intention of it being a more versatile kit than what you would have if you were just a family of 6 that wanted to have something at the house. Or let's say you live in California. I know a lot of people who have like earthquake preparedness kits for emergency supplies and things like that. I would like to see an expansion of those things in Cataclysm. Man, I ranted about this a little bit too long. It just really bothers me that this is only a 20% chance of disinfectant. It's disinfectant is so common, and people never use an entire. Like, when's the last time you used an entire bottle of hydrogen peroxide? I mean, honestly, even in the apocalypse, we're not really like items in Cataclysm. We don't simulate items that other survivors have used. We generally simulate items that people used prior to the apocalypse. So if I go into a house and I find a jug of bleach that only has 2 charges, it's not because another survivor came through and used that. It's because the family that lived there previously used it. And so it doesn't really make sense in the confines of a first aid kit to have someone use an entire bottle of disinfectant. It's just not clearly defined. Is this a prepackaged kit that guaranteed to come with a disinfectant? Or is this a kit that someone put together and then maybe they just didn't put disinfectant in it at all? I just wish there was a more clear definition. Okay, I'm rambling. Hey, everybody. I guess we should probably talk about 0. F. We haven't talked about this in a while. 0. F, although they're making progress, they are working on things, clearing blockers and preparing to release 0. F. There really has not been that much movement. This was announced August 2nd that they were working towards 0. F, and we have still not reached content freeze. It's been 4 or 5 months now, and we're to the point where I really don't foresee 0. F coming by the end of the year. Maybe if they really pushed it and they've already gotten a lot of their bug fixes out of the way, it could come by the end of the year. But with the holidays, you know how things get. With people slowing down and being busy and whatnot. So it seems a little optimistic to me that we could hit that 6-month schedule. It's more likely to come out probably at the beginning of next year, which would make it about a 10 to 12 month difference between 0. E and 0. F. So yeah, my optimism for this being coming about by the end of the year is slowly dwindling. I don't foresee that happening. But they're still making progress. It's not that they're not making progress. It's just that there's quite a lot of stuff that they wanted to do. And a lot of it is just, they're not there yet, right? There's just stuff to work on. Confirmed block, 42 confirmed blockers. Man. Yeah, so not a lot of movement on 0. F. And I would not expect it this year. So that's my take. But again, I don't have any inside knowledge or anything like that. I'm just some guy who tries to pay attention. So anyway, I think that's probably the end of this episode. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode. I do feel like this one got away from me, but I feel like that quite a lot, and people always seem to enjoy the episodes anyway. So hopefully I did not ramble like an idiot. Hopefully everything made sense, and hopefully you enjoyed the episode. Hopefully you're doing well in your personal life. Everybody keep your chins up And I'll be back in a couple of, shouldn't say keep your chins up. It makes it sound like you have more than one chin. Everybody keep your chin up. And I'll be back in a couple weeks with another episode. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.